Hello, and welcome to another episode of AI in the Classroom Daily, a podcast helping educators make sense of AI without the hype. I'm Dan Cogan-Drew, and I use AI as the thinking partner in preparing each of these episodes because I think the best way to talk honestly about AI in education is to work with it openly. So I should say at the outset, I'm co-founder and chief academic officer here at Newsela, and I'm going to be talking about another edtech product, so it's worth disclosing my role. So in today's episode, I want to start with a piece by Pam Cantor, who's someone I've worked with over the years and gotten to know very well, enjoyed her work immensely. She's a child psychiatrist and neuroscientist, and she writes about how brains actually develop. And in a piece she published last week, an essay called The Biology of Becoming. And in it, she credited a piece by Punya Mishra that she said reframed how she thought about why Khanmigo failed. And because Pam thought highly of this, I went and I read the Mishra piece. And so today's episode is going to be about Mishra and what he wrote. So a quick context. A few weeks ago, Sal Khan acknowledged in Chalkbeat that Khanmigo, his AI tutor, was, in his own words, a non-event for most students. His own chief learning officer said she is not seeing the revolution in education. And we covered the product side of this in an earlier episode, the idea of an always-on tutor model and where that overreaches. Today is something different, not whether Khanmigo failed as a product, but why it was probably never going to work in the first place. Now, Mishra's argument in one sentence is basically that Khan's own learning process is rich, active, and full of questions, but the product he designed for students offers none of that. So let me walk through the evidence that Mishra anchors on, because I think it does most of the work here. It was Charlie Rowe's interview where Khan describes how he prepares to teach a new topic. It's a wonderful clip. It's really well chosen by Mishra for his piece. Khan starts out by saying he reads Wikipedia just to get the scaffold. He draws timelines, he copies maps onto a digital blackboard, he builds a picture of the domain for himself before he tries to explain it to anyone else. And then he does something that I personally really admire. He pushes past the surface until he hits a question that the textbook doesn't answer. In this example, it was the myelin sheath around a neuron. The biology book says that the signal travels faster because of the myelin. Khan's reaction was, okay, but how does it putting tissue around a neuron actually make the signal go faster? And the book doesn't tell him. So what does he do? He thinks through by analogy. He reaches for fiber optics, signal amplification, and then he picks up the phone and he calls friends, a biologist, an engineer, and he asks, does this make sense? Sometimes they confirm his intuition, and sometimes beautifully they tell him, you know what, we don't know. And Khan's response is, why didn't the book tell me that? This is what Mishra calls attention to. He says, look at everything Khan does to learn something. He reads widely, he scaffolds, he draws, he questions, he calls friends, he argues, he builds his intuition from the ground up. And then Mishra asks the question that I think makes the whole essay really work, and that is, how does Khan want your kids to learn? And the answer is, watch a video. And there's a gap that he calls attention to, and I think that's the whole problem. So I want to be careful because it would be easy to turn this into a takedown of Khan, and I don't think that's fair, and I don't want to do that. It wouldn't be accurate. Mishra himself is also careful about this. He calls Khan's mistake a failure of educational imagination, not a failure of effort or sincerity. Here's how I'd put it. Khan Academy is exactly what you'd expect a great explainer to build. Clear sequencing, patient delivery, free access for anyone with an internet connection. Hundreds of millions of students have used it, and teachers who've assigned those videos aren't wrong to have done so. There's a real contribution to education, and I don't want to pretend anything else. But things get harder when we make the leap from explanation to tutoring, because tutoring isn't faster explanation. It's a different activity. A tutor's job isn't just to deliver content efficiently. A tutor's job is to get the student to do something, to inquire, to construct, to articulate, to wrestle with something they don't yet understand. And Khanmigo, by Khan's own admission, didn't do that. The student would get prompted with a thoughtful question and type back, I don't know, IDK. Mishra's diagnosis is that they had no reason to do anything else. Nothing was at stake for them. So Khan Academy is what a great explainer builds when they're given the chance to build at scale. Khanmigo is what happens when the same great explainer tries to design tutoring, and the two are not the same job. We did an episode a while back on what Lee Shulman called pedagogical content knowledge, the hard-won understanding of how this particular content will trip up these particular students. It's the third thing that sits at the intersection of knowing your subject and knowing how to teach. The Mishra piece is the biographical version of the same point. Khan has the technology piece and the content piece in spades. The teaching piece he never had to develop because the work has always been explanation, which is not the same thing as classroom instruction. So here's the part that I want to bring to this that goes beyond what Mishra is saying. I think every AI learning tool you encounter has a designer. The designer's assumptions about how learning happens get encoded into the product, whether the designer realizes it or not. When the designer treats an explanation as the unit of learning, the product treats the student as a receiver. That's not a Khan-specific problem, but there's a pattern there. We're going to be living with a lot of AI tools in the coming years that were built by people who are smart, well-intentioned, technically capable. But they've never taught the content that they're now automating the teaching of. Teachers and instructional leaders are increasingly going to be in a position of evaluating those tools and knowing what's missing in the tool according to the design and the designer is really going to become a job. There's one sentence from Khan in the Chalkbeat piece that I want to call attention to, and he says at the end of this that our biggest lever is really investing in the human systems. It's pretty striking, and others have spoken about this as well, to hear from someone who spent 2 decades trying to improve education by routing around the humans. Whether the rest of the edtech industry takes that learning seriously, or whether the people funding the next wave of AI tutors will hear it, is going to remain to be seen. So shifting now, what does this mean for your teaching for the upcoming week? 3 perspectives here: teacher, instructional coach, and district leader. So if you're a teacher and someone hands you a new AI tool, I would tell you there's a question you can ask that cuts through a lot of the marketing. Was this designed by someone who has actually taught this content to students who didn't get it the first time? It's got to be more than just an explanation. If the answer is no, you're probably looking at an explanation machine that's been rebranded as a tutor. It doesn't make it useless, but it tells you what you're working with and what you're going to have to supply as the teacher. If you're an instructional coach, this is a conversation worth having with the teachers in your building about any tool they're being asked to use. It's not a gotcha, it's more of a development of literacy. Help them name the difference between the tool that delivers content well and a tool that supports learning. Those aren't the same thing, and once you see the difference between them, you can't unsee it. And the third, if you're a district leader making a procurement decision, the design question, I think, is a fair one to put any vendor. Who designed the instructional logic in the product? What's their teaching background? Vendors who can answer that with specifics are telling you a very important fact about the design of the product that they want you to use. There's a bigger pattern underneath all of this, and I think that the recurring assumption among technologists that you can design learning systems that close the loop without the teacher in it is something that I'm highly suspicious of, and I'm going to continue to remain watchful for this pattern repeating as we move forward. For now, the Khan story is the cleanest version of the smaller, sharper point. Explanation is not teaching, and a great explainer is not necessarily a great teacher. So, very curious to know what your experience has been. Have you used Khan Academy? Have you used Khanmigo with your students? Do you see this difference? Do you draw this distinction the way I'm drawing it? How do you think about these 2 products? As always, thanks for joining, and we will see you next time.